which is don't video the jurors at all, and so just make sure the jurors are involved, and then also don't direct any of the audio portion of the recording to council table, because I don't want it to interfere with private conversations that Mr. Gilbert and Mr. Davis are having that are privileged. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. And then I think that Mr. Zemmel, you said that you had some motions in limine with respect to Mr. Davis's testimony.
Correct.
Okay.
And the state's moving to exclude any mention of a specific diagnosis of mental illness that Mr. Davis may have. The diagnosis of what I would anticipate, based on some of the things we've heard already from Mr. Davis outside the presence of the jury about him having PTSD. That's a scientific and expert opinion that Mr. Davis does not have the expertise to make that opinion. He has in fact been diagnosed by a doctor with expertise. That would be hearsay for him to say that he has that because his doctor told him so. He can of course speak to his symptoms that he personally experiences, but the conclusion that he suffers from a particular mental illness, I do not believe he can testify to.
Okay, and I understand that motion, but let me ask Mr. Gilbert, do you know if Mr. Davis plans on talking about his PTSD condition, if any?
Yes, Judge, I do think there will be testimony about that, and I do think that a person can talk about their own diagnoses and conditions. I'm pretty sure there's case law that supports that. In addition,
And is this,
independent.
oh, sorry, let me just ask,
Yeah.
is this a diagnosis that's actually been made? Is somebody diagnosed Mr. Davis with PTSD?
Yeah, I get my housing through Cascadia Behavioral Health, and I've been getting SSI for my disabilities for approximately 5 years or more.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 years starting in August. Actually.
So a doctor has diagnosed you with PTSD?
Yes, I was diagnosed
Okay,
through
and I don't need the
Central City.
details.
Okay.
So that, go ahead.
And in addition, it would, regardless, it has independent relevance, and that it's I anticipate that the testimony will be that this is information that he made known publicly and that was presented at city council meetings in the open public, and that's relevant to how they treated him, whether they made reasonable accommodations for his disability, and whether the way that he was treated was reasonable
Okay.
under all the circumstances.
All right, and I understand the motion. I'm going to deny the motion though, and I think that because Mr. Davis can testify that he has been diagnosed with PTSD, and he can testify about the symptoms that he experienced, and Mr. Zemmel, any additional motions?
Nothing additional, just if I can be clear about the court's decision. Is the court saying that he does have is the court ruling that saying that someone has PTSD is not an expert opinion, or is the court finding that there's an independent relevance? Because if it's independent relevance, I'd ask for a limiting instruction. If you're saying that it's not something that requires an expert opinion, I would perhaps suggest or point the court in a little bit of case law that actually discusses PTSD specifically as it relates to the Oregon Evidence Code.
Sure, and I took your objection as being not one of relevance, but one of OEC 703, that it's an expert opinion that's required.
Yes.
And that Mr. Davis isn't qualified to give such an expert opinion. And that argument is well taken, but I think that people can testify about diagnoses that an expert has provided, and I think that it has relevance in this case to the jury, regardless of whether or not that diagnosis is accurate. That's something that Mr. Davis thinks he has, and he's going to be describing the symptoms of that. So I think that it is appropriate for him to testify.
Okay, understood. Just not to argue, but just, the state's position is As far as 702 goes relating to expert opinion, the defense can get over that by saying, well, an expert did give him that opinion. And then I'm objecting to that component on the basis of hearsay, not on the basis of 702.
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
I think I said 703, but you're right, 702 is expert opinions, and no will be.
Okay,
used.
thank you.
And any additional motions?
Nothing further.
Okay, all right. Mr. Gilbert, anything we need to address before we bring back the jury?
Well, just as a matter of efficiency, I was trying to think about our exhibits, and I think we're just gonna play some videos that were created that day by Mr. Davis. There are 3 of them, and maybe I can show them to council, and we can pre-admit those. I can still lay a foundation, I just don't wanna,
Sure.
stumble through that.
Well, so are those videos, Mr. Zimmel, that you've seen, or Mr. Gilbert, do you know if Mr. Zimmel's seen them?
I believe I shared them yesterday.
I have viewed 3 video clips of January 9th at City Hall. I have not seen any other videos.
Okay,
So assuming,
are those the same 3 videos, Mr. Gilbert?
Yes.
Okay, and so Mr. Zimmel, based on seeing those, do you know if you have an objection to those videos?
the only objection I had was a mention of PTSD, which is now irrelevant.
Okay, all right, and so those will be 101, 102, and 103? Or all of them together?
So I would propose that I submit it as an exhibit, all 3 files on one USB drive with
Okay.
a exhibit sticker on there. I can label it
It can just be 101 unless something else already, you're planning on.
101 and yeah.
And are those 3 videos the only thing on that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That'll be 101 and 101 is received. All right, anything else?
I don't think so.
All right, let's go to the jury. Members of the jury, welcome back. Thank you very much for your patience. I'm sorry that we kept you waiting much longer than I anticipated, but I hope that you will accept my assurances that we were very productive in your absence and made a lot of progress. So thank you for your patience. The state has rested, so we're now moving on to the defense case. And Mr. Gilbert, will you call your first witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls David Davis to the stand.
Okay. Mr. Davis, go ahead and approach Mr. McFarland, and he'll give you an honor.
Raise your right hand, please. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, if you could just sit down in the witness box and please state and spell your full name for the record.
My name is David Kif Davis, and it's DAVIDKIFDAVIS.
Mr. Gilbert, go ahead.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davis. How are you?
Oh, pretty good.
Good. So, first of all, let's start. Where do you live?
I live in St. John's, outside Maine, Portland area.
Okay. How long have you lived in Portland?
I've lived here for a little over 20 years.
And what do you do for a living, or what do you do with your time?
I get SSI. I do a lot of artwork, and I do a lot of filming of various stuff, and I also do a lot of research on political stuff from politicians and their various links to business and various shady people, and I do a lot of stuff that do a lot of deep research into a lot of links of corruption and police abuses and constitutional abuses. And one of the main things I'm interested in, but I do have a lot of interest in.
And are you primarily interested in local politics?
Yeah, mainly because that's the politics that seem to affect me the most. I actually used to not really know much about local politics in general, other than I've filmed the police for 20 years, so I knew a certain amount of how the police and interactions with them, but I actually didn't really know much about city government until I was made homeless. And there was an incident where I had rented a room off Craigslist, and the guy turned out to be a child molester with links to the Washington County Sheriff's Department. I could name the guy's name if that's...
So this was an event that kind of sparked an interest in you and local government
What happened
issues?
is I found out about this guy and the fact that his former roommate was illegally evicted, and he has links to the police, and his uncle's a high-ranking cop, and he was basically using his family connections to scam people on Craigslist and have them illegally evicted. And this guy had told me about how he caught this guy with his arm around his wife's daughter, and they were watching porn together, and she was like 11 or 12 years old.
So, I
so-
don't want to cut you off, but I mean, this event that you're describing, this sounds like, would it be fair to say that you saw corruption and that was something that
What
sparked your
happened
interest?
was I confronted him about that and the allegations of his former roommate, and he also made these comments to his wife that the reason I actually married you is because I'm in love with your daughter. And then I brought it up, and he said, him and his wife said, you're gonna be out of here today, watch. And then they called up the police. They falsified a charge and said I pushed the woman, even though I never was charged with anything, and there was no charges filed, and I never actually did touch her. They just said that. And then the police came, and he mentioned that his uncle, Christopher Gilderson, was Washington sheriff, and I was trying to explain the situation to the cop, and the cop actually said, shut the fuck up. And he threatened to arrest me if I kept talking. And I knew I was in a very bad position, and that my freedom was at risk, and also my housing and everything basically, and all my possessions, and I had just recently got off the streets from being homeless, so that was, and then I was basically given the order that we don't care if there's any marks or anything, you're getting an emergency eviction right now, and you need to leave. You can come back and get your stuff later. So that is actually the catalyst in my life that made me really start looking into a lot of the real dark links of Portland power, and I found a lot of stuff that's very similar to the whole Jeffrey Epstein case that's in the news now, with all the links to pedophiles and people in government. And this is one of the main things that I've been talking about, The first time I ever went to city council was, I think, in 2012, and I spoke about becoming homeless through all this stuff. And then I also spoke about some of the links of actual Nick Fish's former boss, Barney Frank, and how he was implicated in the Franklin cover-up and child sex trafficking with a kid named Johnny Gosh, there's a Netflix documentary about him. So I mentioned all this stuff, and the first time ever that I ever went to city council to speak, they actually deleted portions of my audio from city record, which I believe